It's Mark, and yep, it's another time for talking about stop motion as usual. And today's date is March 25th, 2015. And first off, our website has been getting more active lately, and lots of new people joining up. So, welcome to our site, everybody. And so, people are posting videos and photos and other things which are going to be part of their films. And so James posted some photos that I guess he took probably when he went to a park somewhere that looks really nice. And he's going to be inserting these, he said, into some of his shots. So it's going to be somewhat of a live action background plate. Well, not really live action. You can really call it live action. I guess not, but um, basically, he's going to use that for the rear part of his background, and maybe have some other elements. I'm guessing he'll probably have some trees or something in the front, and then some puppets. But I think it's a pretty cool idea. I played with this idea myself a long time ago for a film project I never completed. It was going to be Alice in Wonderland, and that was back in like 2001. And I realized trying to make that film would have been impossible because it would have been, if you ever read the books or look at the books, they're really, they're not very thin. And so trying to make an entire movie, feature film on your own, sometimes, you can be a little too ambitious. But it's a good idea. And, it's something that, of course, Ray Harryhausen and Willis O'Brien, they used in their Dynamation technique. They used a similar kind of um, concept, where you can insert either paintings or other 2D elements like photos or rear screen projections, for example. Um, and Ron Cole is saying just call it a still backdrop. Yeah, and I'm not even really sure if that's appropriate either because it's not really a backdrop. It's just like a layer. Well, anyways, I don't know, but I thought it was pretty neat. And of course, let me see what else. I know that also we've had some people posting photos. This one's from Joseph, and this is a music video set, he says. And let's see here. So I can tell this is really small. He's used some sort of mesh, and you can tell by the focal length that it's very, very tiny. He's got some electrical lights and probably LEDs, I'm guessing, and some sort of a as Ron Cole would say, a backdrop. I think technically this would be an actual backdrop. You can say logically, but and let me see if he's got any other photos here, or is that the only one? I think it is. Yes. Okay. Yeah, my internet's really acting kind of weird tonight because we've been having lots of thunderstorms, and I'm hoping that tonight our show won't quit for any particular unexpected reason. Um, so Joseph also has some more videos like a claymation compilation and a Homer claymation. So definitely, if you guys haven't been on the site for a while, definitely go on there and check out what people are posting. And yeah, so that's really good. And also in the forums too, a lot of people have been posting as well. A lot of people in the welcome mat area telling about their experiences. And so a lot of people post things that I think most of you guys can relate to, working in working in the industry, or just kind of experimenting. And so it's really cool that everybody's really getting involved, and hopefully that means that our challenges, monthly challenges, will pick up too. All right, so anyway, tonight's topic is, now I posted on our site, on our Facebook page, I said, if anybody has any ideas and wants us to talk about them on our live show, to post them below. And Claymore was the only one, and so tonight's show, we're going to dedicate it to her question, which is, how do you make a good story for your animation, or making a successful animation, I guess, like in general. Um, and so I did find a website that had some good ideas. It's this WikiHow page, and somebody, let's see, who was this written by? That's the question I have. Um, I'd like to give the person credit. Let's see. Okay, I'm pretty sure it's this guy Connor. Connor Fleming. I don't know if he's related to Mike Fleming, because he's pretty active as well in the stop motion world. But Connor Fleming, I guess, wrote this. But it says how to write a good story, and he's also got examples on here as well. So if you guys are interested in looking at this yourselves and studying it, I thought it was a really good outline, and so you can find it by probably going to wikihow.com and just searching for how to write a good story. And so this WikiHow is kind of interesting because, you know, I'm not really sure if it's just Connor who is the only author of this article or many people, because, you know, like Wikipedia, anybody can edit the page, and I think this is pretty similar to that. But I've never actually taken part in this, so not totally sure. But let's get on to what actually it talks about. And so to start, it says humans are natural storytellers, but when it comes to writing a good story, you may feel stumped. And I think that's probably what Clay Mara was thinking. You know, like, I don't really know where to start. And of course, this doesn't really apply to every situation, but we'll talk about that later on. So it says, even if you have a vivid imagination and a million great ideas, to write a good story, you have to get inspired, develop your content, and then revise your work until you've written the best story you can write. If you want to write a good story, short story, just follow these steps. So basically what these are just examples. I'm going to click one. So this is a sample mystery story excerpt, and this basically is, you know, how a story would be outlined, you know, like the general plot themes, like, you know, when things happen, when they don't happen. And that goes for all these here, which are, we have for science fiction, we have romance novels, and I don't know, maybe somebody would want to do a romance novel type stop motion, but and also we have fantasy excerpt and also a fiction book excerpt. Now you can, you know, study these yourself when you have your, you know, on your own time. I'm not going to read all these stories, but what they do is they kind of go into how to you know, where to start. And so part one on this page is to get inspired, and this is probably where most people don't have much of a problem. I think a lot of people get inspiration from a lot of sources, and that's what makes you want to make you know, stop motion films. So, but it says here, get inspired by paying attention to the world and what's around you. If you want to be able to write a good short story or even a long one, then you have to keep your eyes and ears open at all times and listen to the world and let it inspire you. You will soon find out what you can write about to make the best story. So you can never put too much time, effort, or description into your story. Here are some great ways to gather details that may lead you to a short story. Alright, now this, like I say, this doesn't apply to every situation, but so number one is to read a book, and experience helps. Maybe the book will give you some good sentence starters, inspiration, and the type of text you want to write. So again, like I say, with stop motion or anything like that, it's mostly a visual storytelling with narration or dialogue. So, you know, you'd have to apply this to that. So maybe a narration or dialogue between two characters. The next thing you'll have the premise for a short story, and notice interesting character traits. Maybe you've noticed that your neighbor likes to talk to his plants, or that he takes his cat for a walk every morning. Try thinking about the inner life of this kind of person and see if a story develops. And I don't know if I've shown this before, but somebody 3D printed out this large puppet, and you can see there's two sizes, and Just to kind of give a visualization for this example, you know, like looking at a character and kind of imagining what you could do with that character. And so this person made this robotic puppet, and it's actually pretty big, I think, because um, you know, these are a pair of headphones. So you figure this large um, wood boring drill here, whatever you call these things, hole cutter, is larger than a human head, right? So, but I thought it was really neat, and you know, if you start with a puppet, sometimes the puppet can be the inspiration that kind of gives you ideas on where your story will lead. And so I thought this character here would be really inspirational. Just, you know, if you start with this, you can think of a million ideas of what this character can actually do in a story. You know, like why is he made of, you know, springs and nuts and bolts and, you know, a hole cutter? You know, well, why is that? And you could start from there. And oh, okay, you guys are. So, anyways, I'm just reading your chat here, making sure I'm not missing anything. So, pay attention to your surroundings. Take a walk or spend some time sitting in the park and observing and see what you can find. Maybe you'll see a bouquet of roses sitting next to a gutter, or a brand new pair of sneakers on a park bench. How did they get there? So, you know, again, it's kind of like starting with your puppet design. You look at it and you kind of question, you know, what could be the story? Like, how did this puppet come to be? Was it built by somebody, maybe a scientist, or maybe somebody who had like a magic wand and could bring whatever he built to life? Or somebody who found a book with some kind of interesting text that if they read it, you know, is magical and brings, you know, whatever is around you to life somehow. You know, there's a million ways you can think of things like that. So also listen to people when they talk. Just one interesting sentence that you hear in passing can inspire you to write an entire story. Maybe you'll hear someone say, "My third wife was the only one I ever loved," or "My dog likes to torture all the men I date." Is that enough to start a story? Sure, it says. And so again, you know, this second one is get inspired by a what-if scenario. This is another great way to start a short story. When you pay attention to the world, you should also pay attention not only to the realities of the world, but to the possibilities of the world. When you do pay attention to a story you hear or an image you see, ask yourself, but what if it happened like this instead? Or what would this person do if? Following this line of thinking can lead you to explore the mysteries that are haunting you. So you don't have to know the ending of a story when you start. In fact, not knowing everything about the story before you start writing it will lead you to explore more creative possibilities and will make your story stronger. So yeah, like when you actually come up with a story, sometimes you know, there's no way to just in a flash know everything that's going to happen, but having a sort of curiosity as to what could happen next is something that is really important. And you might not actually know the ending or how it ends until later. So sometimes I think I know at least for me, I actually started to write a book a while back, and like kind of a fantasy book, and you know, when you write stuff, what I found in myself anyway is that not knowing what's going to happen is can be frustrating, but also if you kind of sit on your story and like if you can't think of an idea right away, sometimes trying to work through it, you know, works. But I found for myself that just giving myself some time away from the story and coming back to it, you kind of have fresh ideas. So I imagine, you know, it depends on how your own mind works. But it says here, so the what-if scenario can be practical or completely fantastical. And you can ask yourself, what if my dog started talking to me? Or what if the neighbor who fawns over my dog too much kidnapped her one day? So, And the next one is getting inspired by your experiences. So of course that's kind of self-explanatory. You know, what happened to you one day. Maybe there's something that was surprising and maybe scary or fun, and you can sort of take that and apply that to your stories. And so Sean says, playing the what if game has been fun for starting many of my short stories. And Ron Cole says, I have a script concept now that I don't have time to write. I haven't put a bit of it on paper, but I have the beginning, most of the middle, and the ending all in my head. That's good. Do you find, do you guys find that if you try to make a story that sometimes you forget parts, and then when you write it down, you reread it and you go, oh yeah, I forgot that. You know, sometimes it happens to me because the book that I was writing, which I still might finish, I'm not really sure if I'm going to or not, but you know, sometimes when you start to get into a complicated scenario, you forget, you know, parts of it because it gets too complicated, and so I'm not really sure if that's good or not. I'm thinking the next time I write a story, I might make like a complete, very basic outline and then build on that from there. But Jeff says, I'll have to check out the wiki site later. There is some good stuff on there. Yeah, it's kind of like a how-to site only. It's not you know, about presidents and, you know, geography and politics, stuff like that. It's just how to do things. So part 1 of 3, get inspired, which I think we kind of covered, but get inspired by a story you heard. Always be on the lookout for stories that your friends or family members have told you that would make great fiction. If your mother or grandmother are always telling you stories about their childhoods, start writing them down. Try to imagine what it was like to grow up in a different time or place and start writing out the possibilities. Don't be put off if you don't know everything about that time period. You can always do your research. So it says, one of your friends says, you won't believe what happened to me last week. Pay attention. You can have the beginnings of a short story right there. And you know, yeah, there's just so many ways you could spin that. But so the short story, it says, could come from an unlikely place. Maybe a radio DJ is reminiscing about his childhood in just a few sentences, and you find yourself suddenly fascinated by what his life must have been like. Just be warned, if you get a reputation of a writer who steals the stories people tell him and uses them for fiction, then people may be more hesitant to open up to you. Alright, so yeah, I mean, that of course is, you know, you gotta be polite and ask if you can use a person's ideas. But if you sort of bend things and twist things to a really high degree, I guess it doesn't matter too much, right? If you steal someone's experiences, if you want to call it stealing. And yes, Sean says, get a bit lost in the details. Exactly. Yeah, you can sort of get off the path of your original ideas if you kind of make it too complex. And Ron Cole says, I jot down notes about important ideas because I do forget. I wrote down a list of the scenes. And Jack Nash says, always write down your ideas even if they seem stupid. And Mike says, I write them down if I still remember them after a day or so. And Ron says, I've often thought that a great story for a short film can be made out of a good joke. That's true. Yeah. That's probably, I think, you know, that's probably the best way to do things for really short stories, especially for like our monthly challenges where you don't have a lot of time. I think jokes are great. And Randy Boyum, I don't know, I haven't seen him in here for a while, but Randy always has really great shorts, you know, extremely short stories which are based on jokes. Now Jeff Davies says, I always try to keep a keyboard or a notepad within reach and put down ideas for a scene, a character, or even an image from a dream. They can all lead to entire stories. Yeah, it's true. Your dreams, of course, are that's another great idea. And so this next one is getting inspired by a setting. Now, I don't know how inspiring this setting is here, but it's like an MS Paint or very, very rough Photoshop painting here. But get inspired by a setting. A story can come from a strong sense of place. You don't have to get inspired by a breathtaking beach or by your amazing vacation in Venice. Instead, get inspiration from the ordinary. Think about what it was like to spend every summer on your grandmother's apple orchard as a kid. Remember what it was like to hang out in your best friend's basement back in high school? So writing about the place can lead you to develop interesting characters and conflicts. And so I'd like to add that, of course we have here a tree, which maybe that's part of the apple orchard they mentioned. But I went on Google and just typed in enchanted forest as a search topic on their image section. And Google Images, like I think I mentioned this on my set building DVD. It's Google Images is a great place to sort of get ideas for settings and places and characters. It doesn't have to be, of course, a stolen idea, but to look at images, you can sort of get lost there and envision what characters might live, in such a place. So this is from, I'm not really sure who made this or anything, but you can see that they've got these little cat characters, right? And you can see some glowing eyes here, and different creatures living, and fireflies, and glowing mushrooms, and looks like some kind of glowing water here. And it doesn't mean you need to steal everyone's ideas, of course, but to get a general feel for what you're trying to convey in a film, and then trying to build this, of course, and as a set, that's another story. But the characters within it, you can sort of look at a photo like this and say, who might live there? What kind of characters? So, okay. So Clay Morrow, you're here. So we've been talking about your topic that you brought up in our Facebook fan page about writing stories. So if you haven't seen the first part of the show, of course, it will be archived on our YouTube channel. But it's a really good topic, I think, and lots of people here have been giving some good ideas as well. Sarang Cole is saying, a stop motion animator walks into a bar. Yeah, so we were just saying before that jokes are a great way to do a short story, because jokes, of course, are basically stories. They're really short stories that get to the twist of the plot, if you want to call it that. It gets to the plot kind of quickly, and most jokes are very surprising. But now Jack Nash says, how about a modern twist on Aesop's Fable? And yeah, all kinds of things you could do. And yeah, so Jack Nash is joking that a stop motion animator walks into a bar and tries to figure out how to make a a mini bar out of cardboard. Yeah. But so, and Ron says, the other best way I know of coming up with scenes and stories is to listen to music. Movie soundtracks from films you don't know so well can inspire scenes to play out in your mind. That's a good point. So setting is a great way to come up with ideas, and sometimes you could look at a space station, someone makes an artistic rendition of one of those, or even looking at real spaceships and airplanes, and things that people have designed and tried to launch into space, you know, or that's kind of inspiring. But the other thing it says here is get inspired by a writing exercise. Writing exercises have helped a lot of writers develop their creativity, find inspiration in unlikely places, and to force themselves to write when they feel like they have no ideas. So yeah, I guess writer's block is something that everybody gets. Again, if your story is so short, it might not be a problem for you. And this is, I think, kind of more in this wiki is more in line for writing like a book, you know, a small book. But it says you can start with a daily warm-up writing exercise just for 10 to 15 minutes to get your mind going, or even write for an hour based on exercise, even if you don't feel inspired at all. Here are some great writing exercises to get you started. So start a story with the following opening sentence. I've never told this to anyone before. So yeah, it just kind of starts you off with the premise, you know, somebody's telling you something that is a secret, and what did they reveal? So that can go in any direction. And so look at a picture of an ordinary barn in a field, then describe it from the point of view of someone who has just committed murder. Do this again from the point of view of a girl who has just lost her mother. See how a character's thoughts can influence how he sees the world. Yeah, so character development is, I don't know if they talk about that in here, but that's something that, you know, sometimes you can start out, like I said before, with this character, you can sort of imagine, you know, how did this character come to be? You know, was it by accident? You know, did a machine break in a robotics factory and create him by accident, and you know, and take it from there? So I think that's kind of the same sort of idea, you know, but you're starting with where they're at, you know, what sort of setting they're in. So pick a person in your life who you absolutely dislike. Now try writing a story from that person's point of view. Try to make the reader sympathize with him as much as possible. So that's interesting, right? And so Claymore says, I love writing stories these days. I'm still not that good in making scenery out of clay. Yeah, that's the thing. No, so if you start out with a enchanted forest, you know, or something along these lines, and you know, maybe you think this would be really cool to make as a stop motion setting, of course, you know, something like this, even if you can draw this well and come up with this, you had to make it in 3 dimensions, right? So you may, you know, like it depends on your situation and your skills, but you may try to think of some way to do this that is you know, quick. Like you could actually paint this on glass with clay. You could thin your clay down with like mineral oil and actually try to paint a background like this. And if you're not really good at that, you can actually make it blurry, you know, a little bit blurry, so that it's not you can't see all the details, but you can get the impression of it. So you can actually come up with a whole new style based on your own strengths or weaknesses. But yeah, that's the thing. You know, you might want to think of something more simple as well. And so, all right. So you guys are typing a lot here. I can't read everything, but let's move on. So the arguments. Have 2 characters arguing about something completely mundane, like who is going to take out the trash or who will pay for the movie. Make it clear that this argument is really about something bigger and more serious, such as who is going to end the relationship or who has been giving too much and not getting anything back. Try to let the dialogue do all the work. And body language, write 500 words that describe two characters who are sitting next to each other. Without using dialogue, let the reader see exactly how these two characters feel about each other. So they call that an animation pantomime. So that is basically, if you ever watch, and I think Anthony Scott had the best example of, well, I mean, there's so many great examples, but Anthony Scott had a particularly good example of body language and the Nightmare Before Christmas, where Jack is saying, you know, what have I done? What it's like the he's in the graveyard, right? So most people know that scene where he's so depressed, you know, he's ruined Christmas for everybody, and he had all these great intentions, and then his, you know, the military shoots him out of the sky, and he lands into a cemetery, and he's, you know, so unhappy, and he thought everybody would love all the monsters and snakes and, you know, creatures that he put under their Christmas trees. And so if you look at that and study those kinds of scenes, especially from that movie, you can really see that, you know, even though the puppet is not a living thing, using body language like that can really tell a story in itself. You know, because you don't have, I mean, even though it's a song and he's actually saying how he feels, even if you took away the music and just had the body language, you could tell a story just with that. So in a sense, you can still come up with a story just like that. And I guess Morph also from Aardman uses a lot of body language and morphing, you know, hence the word morph. But body language is really important in telling the story, because they don't really use any dialogue other than you know, little grunts and things like that. So sometimes the limits of your abilities can, you know, whatever you're good at, if it is animation and body language, you could do a story that way. So Ron says, that's what I forced myself to do with my most recent story idea. I started by realizing that one of my favorite films is Ghostbusters, and so I came up with an action, comedy, sci-fi story. So Ron was inspired by a movie, and I think that's where most inspiration, you know, comes from, are other movies. At least for me, it's always been that way, because I think when you're an animator, you know, you look at something visual and you think more visually than most people. You know, you can envision the ghosts and the lightning bolts and things like that, you know, from the film extremely easily. And so I think like Clay Mara, you know, it seems like Clay Mara maybe is more of a you know, inspired by painterly sorts of things. Like I notice a lot of Clay Mara, your sets and things are very they seem like illustrations almost. So you might look at illustrations and try to maybe, you know, what would happen if a painting came to life or something, you know, as an example. But anyways, so getting inspired by reading short stories, you know, and then they list here, so, you know, stories that you could read. Depends on your taste in stories. If you like classics, you know, maybe you want to read a classic book, or maybe you like comic books. When I was working with Robert Benfer, Knox Corner, many years ago, he was trying to come up with, well, he came up with a story called Villain, and it was based around sort of a comic book type of idea where some of his friends would draw characters that were into making comic books, actually illustrating them, and starting with that, you know, so there's that possibility. What else? Other things that, you know, that might motivate you would be something like if you're an environmentalist. I know when I worked for John Lemon Films, they were very environmentally conscious, and so they came up with a character called Henry Cycle. So Henry is like, it's like the word recycle, you know, Henry Cycle, get it? And he's like a superhero of cleaning up the environment and how to keep your garage safe from toxic chemicals and recycling and uh, worrying about what happens if you have like what was that commercial we did? It had cleaning chemicals or something in a garage, and so what do? Buy biodegradable cleaning products instead. It's safer. So something like that might be a starting point as well. And so we have developing your story. We have, I guess this is third, second, and first person. Developing your point of view. So how you tell a story, from what perspective. And so Ron says here, going back to what he was talking about, that he said that after he came up with a plot concept, he realized that it was a film he wanted to see. And then his story is only like Ghostbusters because it's a comedy that's realistic sci-fi, and there's no ghosts, and it's about aliens. That would be pretty cool. Like a comedic aliens film, having a chest burster and what was that? Was it the chest burster scene where the chest burster comes out of the guy and he's like doing a tap dance? What was that, from Spaceballs or something like that? There's some pretty funny ones out there along those lines, But anyways, so there's the first person point of view, and the first person is told directly from the perspective of a character who uses I to refer to himself. I've never told anyone this before is an example of a first person writing style. Third person perspective, and the third person is when you write about a character using he or she from an outside perspective. So such as saying he was tired in the third person. And so the author can get close to a character's thoughts or can be more distant from the character from that perspective. Was it Spaceballs? Yeah. That's what it was, yep. That's a pretty funny. I think there is actually a new Spaceballs movie coming out, I just heard. But you hear stories like that, you don't know if you can believe them because they kind of, a lot of people get excited. They're like, oh yeah, there's going to be a Spaceballs film, and then they kind of, it's like the Pinocchio film, the stop motion Pinocchio film, right? Everybody was really excited about it. Yeah, it's going to be awesome. And then people are like, yeah, we can't find the money, and we're doing other film projects, so I never get my hopes too high. So then there's a second person perspective, and the second person addresses the reader directly as you, as in you are walking into your office. So this can be a great technique for grabbing the reader, but it can be a bit overdone. So again, this is more for writing books, but still, it's definitely applicable to story writing as well, for film. And develop your plot. Every short story should have a plot that grips the reader, leading him to ask what will happen next. And that is the thing that I think, if you've ever seen a book that's been adapted for film, a lot of books are written, and then somebody reads the book and they're like, let's make it into a movie, it'll be awesome. And they'll say that it was adapted for, they'll adapt it specifically for film, for the viewer that watches it, because if you have a book that's especially big and especially long, they have to condense it, and they also have to make it exciting. And a lot of times, if you have a $1 billion budget, you have like an audience that watches your film, and you kind of see what parts are lacking by their response. Is it keeping them on the edge of their seat, or is it like there's this exciting part in the beginning, and then for 45 minutes it's really boring, nothing happens, and then all of a sudden something exciting happens, and then that's the end, and then someone will review the film and say, oh, well, the middle part is really kind of slow, it's kind of boring. So what they'll do is they'll embellish, I guess would be the word, that area where it's slow, or they'll edit out scenes and add scenes, later on, so that the exciting part is moved towards the middle of the film, and then so there's a lot of ways to do it. But the idea is to keep your audience excited about the details, about what's happening throughout the whole film, that they need to be entertained. So sometimes, you have to keep that in mind as you're running your story. Will it keep the audience excited, right? So it says here, this doesn't mean that your story should include a high-speed chase or a murder. Your reader can want to know what happens next, even if all that's happening is that two people are talking over coffee. So though every short story is different, here are some basic elements of a story. So first one would be the rising action exposition. This typically comes at the beginning of a short story when readers are introduced to the main characters, the setting, and the central conflict. However, some stories start off right in the middle of the action and make the reader work backwards to find out what's really going on. And there's also the conflict, which is where the stakes of the story okay, so the conflict, the stakes of the story. There has to be something at stake in every story, or the reader won't want to keep reading. So this is kind of like what I was saying before. There has to be some, when we're talking about stop motion, visually there has to be something there that makes you want to keep watching. So no matter how beautiful the language may be, every story needs conflict or a point of tension. It can be as dramatic as two men fighting over the same women, or a girl wondering if her friend is going to invite her to a party. The nature of the conflict isn't important. What's important is the readers have to care what happens. So an example of this would be, where you learn about a character early in the film, and then you sort of get involved with them emotionally. Like, you get to know them, they have habits, and you feel a connection to that character, and then that character walks into a scary situation where they might get killed, or they might fall into a hole that somebody, like a trap that somebody set, or they're gonna walk into a surprise birthday party celebration where everybody's there waiting for him to walk in, and what's gonna happen, so that's kind of one of those things where keeping people on the edge of their seat is what makes them want to watch the film further as you go along. And the falling action, the resolution of the story, after the conflict is resolved or discussed, the story has to wrap up. But most short stories don't have neat happy endings, or even neat endings at that. Many stories end on a word or image that leaves the reader thinking. If the story is neatly wrapped up at the end, then you've removed some of the mystery and allure. So it's kind of like sequels, the end of the movie leaves you hanging a little bit. What's going to happen if, this character, you don't know if he's okay, or, or if they've, what the person's going to do, and you're kind of left hanging there. And so, of course, you'll have a sequel, right? Kind of gives you some reason to want to watch more. So Sean says there was a Spaceballs animated series. I didn't know that. So many comments, guys. Let me see here. Yeah, so Ron says, I try now to stay away from issues that serious. Oh, I see what you're saying. So I now try to stay away from issues and serious statements. People mostly want films to be fun, but most indie filmmakers want to be too deadly serious. Yeah. Well, In the Fall of Gravity was a little bit serious, I would say. But at the same time, it wasn't so serious. And so Mike Emirates says, that's interesting, Ron. I'm actually a bit torn on how I feel. On one hand, I want to express darker experiences through art, but on the other hand, I know I'd rather work on more positive material. See, my next film is going to be, if I make it into a film, I might make it into an illustrated book, because that would be a lot faster. I'm kind of considering if I want to do that or not. But anyway, it's going to be sort of a dark topic. But anyways, so yeah, I don't know. You know, what is the best way to go? Like, does it matter? Or I guess, like for example, I think with Ron, I think if you had that belief and that's your feeling, and that's probably what would be best for you, is to work on a light-hearted film. Whereas someone like H.R. Giger would be, I think if you asked him to make like a comedy film, and if he were still alive, of course, because he's gone, but someone like H.R. Giger would be like, you want me to do what? You know, are you crazy? So everybody has their own ideas. And so Sean says, I like having an emotional investment with a character when I watch a show or movie. And Ron says, I love my short film In the Fall of Gravity, but I realized after I made it that it was way too serious and psychological to be a fun film people would love. Indie filmmakers tend to do that. I don't know why people wouldn't like it. I think it's great, but just my opinion. And so Sean says, I really enjoyed your short film, Ron. Alright, so moving on, developing your characters. Your story has to have a character or characters that your readers should care about and even root for, even if the characters aren't upstanding citizens or good-natured people. You can characterize your characters through a number of different ways, and all of them are valid. Here are a few ways to give your readers a strong sense of your characters. Describe what they say. The perfect line of dialogue can shed insight into a character's intentions, especially if the dialogue doesn't match what he's thinking. Yeah, you know what my 6-year-old son likes to say a lot? He goes, "Get to the chopper." It's like a Arnold Schwarzenegger line, you know? And I don't know where he heard it from, but it's stuck in his mind. And that always makes me wonder, you know, how is it that stuff like that sticks? But describe what they do. Does the character get up at 6 every morning without an alarm, or does he spend hours hitting the snooze button before he gets up? Every little action can help build the character, however insignificant it might seem at first. Describe what they look like. Of course, this is something that, you know, as soon as you film your character your puppet that you've made, that doesn't really necessarily, you don't have to describe, but it says, does the character dress to the nines when he goes to the supermarket, or smile maniacally during a moment of deep sadness? A character's physical appearance can shed insight into his mental state. So again, that kind of goes back into the body posture and pantomime, you know, the pose to pose that you use. If your poses are strong and expressive, that can go a long way. So it depends on how good you are at making puppets, because, you know, one of the puppets I made for Zombie Pirate Tales, the Shimbu character, his armature was built well, but it was built for clay puppets, and I used foam latex on it. And when the puppet was baked in the oven, the latex was baked, the epoxy dried out, and the armature didn't work so well, so I wasn't able to get a lot of expression that I wanted to out of this character. And so sometimes that doesn't work, you know, so you have to use other ways to do that. But describe how they interact with others. Is your character debilitatingly shy, or so bossy that everyone around him is afraid to open his mouth? Is he nice to waiters because his mother was a waitress, or is he a jerk to all waitresses because a waitress once broke his heart, or just because he feels like it? Seeing a character out in the world can reveal a lot about him. So we have about 10 more minutes left. How much long? Let's see how much more there is to this. I might just kind of paraphrase things here and skip over stuff, but yeah, I'm gonna have to, I guess. But these are all great ideas. And by the way, if you guys are interested in this, just for those who joined late, this is on wikihow.com, and you can, if you want to find this, go to search for how to write a good story up here in the custom search, and you should be able to find this. The next part is developing your dialogue, and so the dialogue between two characters can also shed a lot of insight into their dynamic, and develop your setting. The setting of your short story can be crucial, or it can have very little to do with the events that unfold. And so like with this, like I was saying before, if you have something like one of our monthly challenge short films that you make, and you don't have a lot of time, somebody wrote in our forums, they asked, well, can we use, set pieces that we built in the past on our new films for our challenges? And I said yes. If you have, for example, you want to make something quickly, but you can't make it, a really intricate set, finding things that are lying around, in your house that will work for your set, or printing out pictures and putting them as backdrops, which I think would be a correct word to use for actually a physical backdrop, or using a digital backdrop. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Using photographs, trying to do something where if you're not so skilled and your set is really huge. Even Alba, I think, for her latest short film project, she said that she's going to be using green screen to sort of use a painted background. So whatever it takes, you can. It doesn't necessarily have to take a lot of time to do. And what else here? Develop your voice. Okay, so yeah, this is more or less, you can't really say this for filmmaking, but for voice actors you could. How the person that is doing your dialogue speaks, either they're frantic or they're very calm or they're angry. Using that to tell your story is also another important thing. So avoiding pitfalls for your short story writing. Don't tell everybody or give the plot away at the beginning, which is kind of common sense, right? Avoid the trick ending. No one likes to read a story only to find out that it was all a dream, or that it was told from the point of view of an alien the whole time. Keep it simple. You may think that using floral, elevated language to write a story is the way to go, but simple language is probably better. Avoid exposition in dialogue. Narration, non-dialogue, should tell your readers the basic information about the story. Dialogue should be used to provide more information about the character and their struggles and relationships, but not give the facts of the story. For example, a character should not say, "Sam, though you are 20 years old and this is your second year at Harvard," because this is something that both characters already know. So I guess getting to the point is what they're saying. Don't add, and especially for animation, you want to take out anything that's unnecessary. Get to the point. No scene should be in the film that doesn't help the story move forward, is I guess another way to put that. Keep the stakes of the story clear. Any reader should be able to answer what is at stake while he's reading your story, and after he's done. If a reader finishes the story and has no idea what was at stake, then the story has failed. So Easy865 is saying, how often does this channel live stream? And it's every Wednesday, every single Wednesday at 8 p.m. Central. Now, Ron Cole says, most great films end with a light shower or a light show or explosion of some kind. Think about it. That is kind of true, actually. That's kind of true. Excuse me. Okay, so so revise your story, and this is where, yeah, you'd want to basically, you know, come in with a fresh mind and reread it, make sure it's clear, concise. Sometimes just printing out a story that you've been writing in a Word document can help you see it from a new perspective, which is very true, which is what I did with my story. And I don't know if I'm going to finish it, because I don't know if storytelling is my strength, but I might, just to say I've completed it. But setting your work aside for a little while is a good move, but don't set it aside for so long that you lose interest in it. And get feedback, and that's a really important one. So if you write a short story for your film, yeah, I would definitely have people read it before you embark on making puppets and big sets, and as Ron Cole says, light shows and explosions. You know, don't blow up your own version of the Death Star with explosives and gasoline and fireworks until you know that it would actually make a good story, right? That's I think that's the most important part, actually, is getting feedback. But revise the story using a variety of tricks. And I don't think I'm going to read all this stuff, but these are all really great tips. So if you guys want to read the rest of this yourself, there's only a little bit left. And it only took us about almost an hour exactly to get through. So again, it's at wikihow.com, and type in how to write a good story. All right, so yeah, so Easy865, we used to be on live stream, and they changed their format, and I couldn't do a lot of things I wanted to do, and they wanted to start charging because I had so many videos on there, and they're changing their format over to a paid format, which is outrageously expensive for, I mean, considering that YouTube does the same thing for free. And their software that they had was not really, I mean, it was probably really good if I had a small studio where other people were helping out with the show, you know, where they could adjust my microphone levels and cut to clips and all that kind of stuff. I do that all by myself because, you know, nobody else is really interested as much in where I live in stop motion as me. So yeah, you know, it just, all the stuff that they had on live stream was kind of nice, but it didn't really help me, and they wanted to charge, and I don't have a lot of cash. But yeah, hopefully, you know, this actually, you know, when I started using YouTube, I'm using this open broadcast software, right? And this is also free, and it's got a lot of stuff you can do. I can put welcome screens on here, and change monitors, and I can do all sorts of stuff, and it's all for free. So it just seemed like the smart idea. And if you guys are interested in doing these a live show, it's actually pretty darn simple. If you have a YouTube channel with, you know, maybe a couple thousand subscribers. And Mike is making a point about feedback. He says, be careful who you get feedback from. Make sure it's someone honest who you trust. I've ran into some rare folks who will just rip everything apart because they don't want to see you succeed. That's true, yeah. I mean, if you can't trust the person, then in real life, you know. Now, Ron Cole says, The show plays much smoother now that Mark switched to YouTube. Yeah, you guys remember, and a lot of my shows didn't record. If you recall, towards the end there, their service was actually getting worse. And that always bothered me because I think maybe one out of, I would say, every 5 shows, 4 or 5 shows, wouldn't record. So if people wanted to watch the reruns, they couldn't. And I would see the recordings on their server, and it would try to encode, and yeah, it didn't work. And Ron Cole says, "Ha, I froze up when I tried to host this show." That's right. Yeah. It's live stream was not so great. But anyways, guys, I guess it does wrap up our show for tonight. And so writing stories is like the most important thing in the world when it comes to filmmaking. You know, because if you don't have a point to make, you know, it's just a lot of work. Stop motion is a lot of work. So try to make a point. Try to get something across to people. Try to convey something that's either close to your heart or that you're excited about, or just like, you know, like Ron Cole was saying, jokes are always fun. And Shauna is asking, I don't know if there's enough time left, but I sent you a link on Facebook to a short YouTube clip about animation for Star Wars. Oh, okay. I'll look really quick. Let's see. Yeah, I have to put my son to sleep here soon, so he's actually supposed to be asleep. So let's see. Ah, okay. Was it on our fan page, Sean, or oh. Ron Cole says, I don't mean the show froze, I mean I froze. Yeah, it takes a little getting used to. Okay, I see it here. I see it, Sean. Let me, I'm bringing it up now here. Let's see. Alright, yeah, we can definitely watch this. It's short.
At one time, there was like no decisions how to do any of this stuff, and all there were these wonderful color artworks that Ralph had done of the big walking machines. So we had to figure out how we're going to do this, and one of the thoughts was to make a robot. We're going to make a complete robotic one that would actually kind of move by itself, a walking machine maybe 5 feet tall or something like that. And that seemed like it could be very complicated and very expensive to do, but my background is before Star Wars was really in stop motion animation. And I'd seen King Kong when I was a kid and all. And so I pushed to do it in stop motion because they're machines anyway, and if they move sort of like a little staccato-like, it would just make them look more like machines. So we did it in stop motion, and we did it with models that were as big as a person could animate, which is about the size that a person can get their hands in to move it frame at a time. And we did it in front of big paintings that were, instead of blue screen compositing, paintings that were done to look like the sky, but painted so realistically you thought they were actually outdoors. The sets that were built were baking soda, and with trap doors in them so the animators could pop up, animate the figure, and go back down, and you could shoot a frame of film. And at 24 frames a second, we sort of, sometimes we'd get a shot a day if we were doing real good, which is like a 5-second shot. So we had scales that were like 5 foot or 4 foot tall one for scenes when it sort of blew up, some part of it blew up and it had to fall over. Those were done with high-speed photography. And we had some photo cutouts that were in the backgrounds, or sometimes when you see about 6 or 7 of them, and the ones in the background are just Polaroid photo cutouts that are sort of animated. And then we had little tiny ones that we used for the very opening shot, I think when you see them, or some of the speeder shots when you see them off in the distance, real tiny ones off in the distance there. And we just made them as small as we could possibly make them to do it. So we had lots of different scales that we mixed and matched depending on the shot.
Murin and talking about the Adet walkers in Empire Strikes Back, which is really cool, and those are some of my favorite stop motion shots, definitely. So I want to thank you for sharing that, Sean. That's really cool. Alright, so anyways, we are over time, guys, and so next week, I'm not sure what the topic will be, but if I will probably post a question the day before on our either on our fan page, or maybe I'll post it on our site, and you guys can tell me what you want to talk about. All right, so see you guys all next week.